Hello. My name is Sirius, and before you ask, no, it's not because of the Harry Potter character, although I admit the name had an interesting resurgence after those books. But I'm here for a reason much older, and I dare say far more important than fiction. I'm here because you need to hear something that completely changed the way I understand reality. And look, I've studied a lot in this life. I've dived into ancient texts. I've spent sleepless nights trying to decipher mysteries that most people don't even know exist. But this is different. Let me tell you a story. Actually, it's not quite a story. It's more of an event that happened a little over 2,000 years ago, and one that most people know in a completely distorted way. You've probably heard of it, but I guarantee never like this. We're in Jerusalem, more specifically on the Mount of Olives. Now pay attention to this detail because it matters. There are exactly 3 nights left until the crucifixion. 72 hours. And if you know the story even minimally, you know that Jesus knew exactly what was about to happen to him. So imagine the scene with me for a moment. You know that in 3 days your life will end in one of the most brutal ways ever invented by humanity. What would you do? How would you spend your final hours? Most of us would probably panic, right? Or try to escape, or be in denial, or spend time saying goodbye to the people we love. Human things, understandable. But Jesus? He does something that makes absolutely no sense at first glance. He gathers his closest disciples, those who had been with him from the beginning, and climbs with them to the top of this mountain. And look, I need you to visualize this properly because the atmosphere here is crucial. This is not a calm meeting. The air is heavy, dense, charged with something that no one can name, but everyone can feel pressing against their chest. You know that feeling when you know something big is about to happen, but you don't know exactly what? It's that, but multiplied by 1,000. The disciples are nervous. Some can't stop moving their hands. Others constantly look around as if expecting Roman soldiers to appear at any moment from the shadows. Peter is sweating, and it's not because of the night heat. John is silent, which for those who know John is extremely unusual. James has that look of someone processing 1,000 thoughts at once and can't organize any of them. All of them know, even without being able to articulate how they know, that something monumental is approaching. There's a tension in the air you could cut with a knife, and it's exactly at this moment, when their anxiety is at its peak, that Jesus does something absolutely unexpected. At least, unexpected for them. For us, 2,000 years later, with the knowledge I have now, it makes all the sense in the universe, but at that moment, it must have seemed completely out of context. Instead of talking about his imminent death, instead of offering words of comfort or giving final instructions on how they should continue his work, Jesus simply raises his right arm, slowly, deliberately, and points to the empty space ahead of them. Now, let me be very clear here because this is the moment where most people completely lose the meaning of what's happening. He's not pointing at a distant mountain. He's not pointing at the stars. He's not pointing at a building or a path or anything physical that normal eyes can detect. He's pointing at what appears to be just air, darkness, emptiness. The disciples follow the direction of his finger with their eyes, and they see nothing, absolutely nothing. Imagine their confusion at this moment. Why is our Master, in his final days of life, pointing at nothing? But here's the part that gives me chills every time I think about it. Jesus sees something, something they cannot see, something that's there, as real as the stone beneath their feet, but operating on a frequency, on a dimension that physical eyes simply cannot capture. And then he speaks, and the words that come out of his mouth are so loaded with meaning, so dense with hidden truth, that I honestly believe this should be in huge glowing letters in every religious text on the planet. But it's not. It's been basically forgotten, misinterpreted, or ignored. Can you see it? He asks. And by the way he speaks, it's clear he knows that no, most cannot. The portal is right there. It manifests, it opens, but not for everyone. It was never for everyone. Not for the crowds I taught in the squares. Not for the thousands who came seeking bread and fish. It reveals itself only to those who carry a specific mark, a signature, a code in the very essence of who they are. And here I need to pause because you need to understand something fundamental before we continue. I know how this sounds. I know it seems exclusivist, elitist, as if it's creating a spiritual hierarchy. Stay with me. This is not about being better or worse. This is about mechanics. It's about how reality works in layers that most of us were never taught to perceive, but we'll get there. For now, come back to the mountain with me. Peter, God bless him, was always the most direct of the group. While the others stand there processing, trying to understand, he simply blurts out the question that's burning in his throat. His voice comes out trembling, mixing fear with hope, with desperation. "Master," he says, and I can perfectly imagine the tone. "How do we know? How do I know if I'm one of these people? If this portal you're talking about will open for me?" Jesus stops completely. And what he does next is something that must have frozen the blood of every person present. He turns slowly and looks directly into the eyes of each disciple, one by one. It's not a casual glance. It's not an, "Oh, let me see who's here." It's a look that penetrates, that scans, that reads layers of existence you didn't even know you had. It's the kind of look that sees your naked soul without filters, without masks, without the stories you tell yourself about who you are. And after this eternity of silence, he responds. And the answer is so simple, so direct, and at the same time so profound that it took me years to truly understand all its implications. "If you're asking this question," Jesus says, and I swear I can hear his voice even through all this time, "then you already have the answer. It's always been inside you. You don't need to search for it out there. You only need to recognize it." Now, here's where things get really interesting. And here's where you enter the story. Because while you're watching this now, while something inside you is reacting to these words, you're literally asking the same question Peter asked 2 millennia ago, word for word. Does this apply to me? Am I one of these people? And look, I have no idea how you got here. I don't know if it was the YouTube algorithm, if someone sent it to you, if you were looking for something completely different and this appeared. But here's the part you need to understand. There are no coincidences when it comes to this kind of knowledge. If this reached you, crossing through the absolute chaos of the internet, the infinite noise of millions of videos competing for your attention and landed in front of you right now at this specific moment in your life, that means something. The portal that Jesus mentioned that night on the Mount of Olives was not a beautiful metaphor. It wasn't poetry. It wasn't a figurative way of talking about going to heaven when you die. He was describing a real structure, a dimensional door that exists, that functions, that operates according to specific principles, and most importantly, it doesn't open for just anyone who simply wishes or asks or prays. It recognizes something, a frequency, a signature. And when it finds that signature, it responds. The question that will determine everything else on this journey is simple. Do you carry that signature? Are you one of the people for whom this portal was made? And more importantly, are you ready to discover the answer? Because I'm going to warn you now, before we continue, and this is Sirius speaking to you completely honestly, if the answer is yes, if you really are one of these people, your life will change. Not a little bit, not in a subtle way, completely, irreversibly. There's no going back after you cross this line. So I need to know, do you want to continue? Most people who study the teachings of Jesus make a fundamental mistake. They read his words and immediately try to fit them into moral categories, right and wrong, good and bad, behaviors you should have versus behaviors you should avoid. And look, I'm not saying morality doesn't matter, but when Jesus spoke about this portal, about this narrow path that few find, he wasn't giving an ethics lesson. He was describing physics, universal mechanics, laws that govern how consciousness interacts with dimensions beyond what we can see. Let me explain this in a way that makes sense. When Jesus said the path is narrow and few find it, everyone interpreted that as condemnation, as if he was saying most people aren't good enough, aren't pure enough, don't pray enough. But that's not it. He was describing a fundamental energetic principle. The portal operates on a specific frequency, extremely specific, and it can only detect, can only respond, can only open to consciousnesses that vibrate at that same frequency. Think about radio for a second. You have thousands of stations broadcasting simultaneously, right? All of them sending signals through the air, crossing the same space, existing at the same time. but your radio only picks up one station at a time. Why? Because you tune into a specific frequency. If you're on 98.5 FM, you're not going to hear what's broadcasting on 101.3. It's not because the 101.3 transmission doesn't exist, or because it's inferior. It's simply because you're not tuned to it. The portal works exactly like this. It's always there, always transmitting, always accessible. But it only reveals itself to consciousnesses tuned to the correct frequency. And here's the part that most organized religions don't want you to know. This has nothing to do with following rules. It's not about how many times you go to church or how much time you spend on your knees praying. It's about the vibrational state of your consciousness, about the frequency you naturally emit. Now, the people called chosen ones are not superior. That's another completely misguided interpretation that causes tremendous damage. They're not more evolved souls or better human beings. They're simply consciousnesses that, before being born on this physical plane, before entering these bodies, made an agreement, a cosmic pact, if you want to call it that. This agreement works something like this. A soul prepares to incarnate. It's there, wherever souls stay between lives, and it looks at Earth, at this dense dimension full of forgetfulness, and says something like, I'll descend to that reality. I'll pass through the veil of forgetting. I'll completely forget who I am, where I came from, what I know. I'll experience separation, pain, confusion, all the limitations of human existence. But at some point, at the right moment, I'll remember. I'll awaken. And when that happens, I'll carry a specific frequency that will serve as a beacon for others who are also ready to remember. And here's what makes this so interesting. This frequency is not something you develop during life through spiritual practices. It's encoded in the very structure of your consciousness before you're born. It's woven into the way your soul interacts with this world. That's why you've always felt different. That's why nothing in this material world has ever seemed completely satisfying, no matter how much you conquered or accumulated. This restlessness that lives inside you is not depression. It's not a sign that something is wrong with you. It's not ingratitude for the life you have. It's your soul recognizing that there's something beyond all this. It's the encoded memory of the agreement you made, echoing through the layers of your consciousness, trying to wake you up. Jesus could instantly identify who carried this frequency. It was as if he had an internal detector. That's why you see in the Gospels that he taught in completely different ways depending on who was in front of him. For the crowds, he used parables, simple stories about farmers and seeds, about lost coins and prodigal sons, narratives that could be understood on multiple levels, but that kept the deeper teachings protected, veiled. But for those who carried the frequency, for those he recognized as part of this specific group, he spoke directly, without filters, without metaphors. He delivered pure knowledge about how to navigate between dimensions, about how to access states of consciousness beyond the common human, about how to interact with structures like the portal. And the portal itself is not a passive structure, waiting for someone to find it by accident. It is conscious, alive. It recognizes people who carry the frequency. When someone with the correct signature approaches, something extraordinary happens. The portal begins to respond. It begins to resonate. It begins to open gradually, like a flower recognizing the sun after a long night. It's not force, it's not human will forcing a cosmic door to open. It's mutual recognition. It's like two halves of something that was separated long ago finally reuniting. The portal recognizes you and you recognize the portal. There's an ancient memory being reactivated on both sides. Jesus taught his disciples to identify if they were part of this group, if the portal would respond to them. And he listed specific signs, not vague or subjective signs, but concrete markers that would appear in the life experience of these people. There are 5 of these signs. If you identify 3 or more of them operating in your life, it's not speculation. It's not self-deception. It's not your imagination wanting to feel special. It's objective confirmation that you carry the frequency and that the portal will respond to you. It's not a question of if. It's a question of when. The first sign is perhaps the most profound and the most difficult to ignore. Since you can remember, since your first moments of consciousness in this world, you've felt that you don't belong here. And I'm not talking about feeling socially displaced or not fitting into groups. This is different. This is a visceral sensation that this entire reality, this planet, this dimension, is not your point of origin. It's as if you were a traveler from a distant land who woke up in a foreign country with no memory of how you got there. Everything seems slightly wrong. The rules don't make complete sense. The values that people around you consider important seem superficial. The things that make others happy leave you empty. And there's a constant longing, a yearning for something you can't name, for a place you can't remember, but that your entire body recognizes as true home. This is not escapist fantasy. This is not you trying to avoid responsibilities or run from life. This is soul memory, the chosen ones incarnated from higher dimensions. They brought with them the frequency of these elevated planes, and this frequency creates constant dissonance with the density of earthly reality. It's this dissonance you feel. It's this dimensional frequency that the portal recognizes when it begins to open. The second sign involves something most people dismiss as coincidence or tricks of the mind. You experience what I call glitches in the reality matrix, moments where the normal fabric of existence seems to tear slightly, revealing something underneath. Déjà vu so precise, you can predict the next 3 sentences of a conversation that's supposedly happening for the first time. Moments where time seems to distort, where 5 minutes feel like 5 hours, or where an entire hour passes as if it were seconds. Objects you placed in a specific location appear in another without anyone having moved them. Synchronicities so perfectly orchestrated, they seem impossible to be mere chance. Most people, when they experience these things, immediately look for rational explanations, neurological problems, memory failures, statistical coincidence. And I understand why they do this. It's scary to consider the alternative, but the chosen ones know on a deep and instinctive level that these experiences are real. They're happening because their frequency is already beginning to overlap with the dimension where the portal exists. You're receiving glimpses through the threshold before it opens completely. Each glitch in the matrix is the portal trying to communicate with you, trying to show you that there's more than this solid, fixed reality you were taught to accept as the whole truth. The more of these glitches you experience, the closer you are to the moment where the portal opens completely. The third sign is something you've probably tried to hide your whole life. You perceive energies that other people simply cannot detect. And I'm not talking about dramatic psychic abilities like seeing the future or reading minds word for word. I'm talking about something more subtle, more constant, more integrated into the way you navigate the world. You enter a room and immediately know what happened there before you arrived, not through obvious visual clues, not because someone told you. You simply feel it. If there was an argument, if someone cried, if something important was decided, you pick it up in the air as if the space had recorded the emotional memory of the event. The walls speak to you in a language that has no words. You meet someone for the first time and within seconds, sometimes instantly, you have a complete map of that person's emotional state. You know if they're faking happiness while hiding deep sadness. You feel when someone is lying, not because the story doesn't make logical sense, but because the energy behind the words is misaligned with what's being said. You perceive when someone is carrying unresolved trauma, even if that person has built a perfect facade that deceives everyone else. And there's more. You feel shifts in the collective field before significant events happen. Days before important news emerges, you're already restless, already feeling that something is changing in the global frequency. Before crises, before social transformations, before moments of rupture in collective consciousness, you feel the pressure building like someone who can predict storms by the change in atmospheric pressure. This is not common emotional sensitivity. This is not empathy in the traditional psychological sense. This is dimensional perception. Your consciousness is already operating partially at the frequency where the portal exists. You're sensing layers of reality that are invisible to most because your perception has already begun to expand beyond normal human limitations. You're seeing and feeling what others cannot because you already have one foot in the portal's dimension, even before it opens completely. Now, the fourth sign is probably the most difficult to accept. It's the one most people resist most strongly because it contradicts everything modern culture teaches us about positivity and manifestation and creating the life of our dreams. But Jesus was absolutely clear about this. Even though his words have been misinterpreted for centuries, your suffering was extreme and had a specific purpose. I'm not talking about common difficulties that everyone faces. I'm talking about pain that broke you, trauma that shattered you, losses that made you question whether you could keep breathing, experiences that forced you to confront the darkest abysses of human existence, that took you to places inside yourself you didn't know existed. When Jesus said, "Blessed are those who suffer," when he spoke about persecution and tribulation, he wasn't romanticizing pain. He wasn't saying that suffering is good in itself. He was describing a mechanism of transformation. Intense suffering does something specific to human consciousness. It breaks conditioning. It shatters illusions. It forces consciousness to make a fundamental choice, collapse completely, or expand beyond everything you thought was possible. Most people, when facing extreme suffering, collapse, and there's no judgment in that. It's an understandable human response. But the chosen ones are those who, when pain broke them into 1,000 pieces, used those fragments to rebuild something greater. They expanded through pain instead of being destroyed by it. Your suffering was not random. It wasn't punishment. It wasn't bad luck. It was initiation. It was the universe preparing you, forging you, refining you. Each experience that almost destroyed you was burning away everything that wasn't essential, removing false layers of identity, dissolving limiting beliefs you didn't even know you were carrying. What remained after the fire passed was the pure core, the essential frequency, exactly the frequency the portal recognizes. The scars you carry are not defects, they're certifications. They're marks that you went through the initiation and survived, more than survived. You transmuted. And this transmutation permanently changed your vibrational signature, aligning it precisely with the portal's frequency. And now we arrive at the fifth and final sign. And this one is the most direct, the most immediate, and perhaps the most impossible to ignore. You're receiving this message right now, at this specific moment. And look, I know how this might sound. It seems like cheap psychological manipulation, right? It seems like those marketing tricks that say, if you're reading this, it's because you were specially chosen. But let me explain why this is fundamentally different. The portal doesn't passively wait for chosen ones to find it by chance. It's active, conscious, intelligent. It recognizes those who carry the frequency and begins to orchestrate reality around them, to guide them exactly where they need to be. It creates the synchronicities. It moves the pieces on the cosmic board. It manipulates probabilities in ways that seem impossible. Think about everything that had to happen for you to be here now. Think about the chaotic internet algorithm, the millions of videos competing for attention, the infinite distractions that could have pulled you in any other direction. Think about the timing. Why today? Why now? Why at this specific moment in your life and not 6 months ago or a year in the future? If you managed to cross through all that noise, if something brought you here and kept you watching until this point, this is not coincidence. It's the portal recognizing you. It's calling you. It's synchronicity being orchestrated to position you exactly where you need to be to receive this information at the moment you're ready to process it. This is how the portal works. It doesn't wait. It acts. It pulls you. It creates paths. And the more you respond to these calls, the more you follow these synchronicities, the stronger the connection becomes, until eventually the resonance reaches critical mass and the portal is no longer just calling you. It's opening. So now you do the count. Of the 5 signs I described, how many do you recognize operating in your life? Be brutally honest with yourself. Don't force a fit if something doesn't genuinely resonate, but also don't deny what you know is true just because it seems scary to admit it. If you identified 3 or more of these signs, if they describe your life experience accurately, then this is not speculation. It's not positive thinking. It's not you wanting to feel special. It's objective confirmation. You carry the frequency. You made the agreement before you were born. You're one of the people for whom the portal was made. And when I say the portal will open for you, it's not a vague possibility. It's a cosmic certainty. It's encoded in the structure of reality. It's written in the fabric of the universe. The portal recognizes your signature. It's already begun to respond. The only variable that remains is time. Not if, but when. Jesus knew this. That's why he could look at someone and say with absolute certainty, "You will follow me, you will understand, you will cross over." He wasn't making predictions. He was reading frequencies. He was seeing who carried the mark. And he knew that for those who carried it, awakening was inevitable. Now you're at the same point those disciples were at that night on the Mount of Olives. You've received the knowledge. You've identified the signs. You know, on a level that goes beyond the rational mind, if you're one of the chosen people, and if you are, if the signs are there, then your journey changed at this exact moment. There's no going back. You cannot unknow what you now know. You cannot ignore the call you've already heard clearly. The portal is responding to you. It's beginning its opening process. And when it opens completely, when you cross to the other side and recognize yourself as the infinite source experiencing life through a temporary form, everything will change. Your perception, your purpose, the way you move through the world. You will become what Jesus became, a living portal, someone whose mere presence begins to awaken others, someone who helps other chosen ones recognize that they too carry the frequency, someone who fulfills the agreement made before birth. Descend, forget, remember, and help others remember. This is the truth Jesus revealed that last night before everything changed. The portal is real. It only opens for certain people. And if you made it here, if something inside you is vibrating with every word I've said, then you're one of them. The portal is calling. The question that remains is, will you answer? I am serious. And if you recognized your own story in these words, leave a comment sharing which of the 5 signs resonated most deeply with you. Your confirmation might be exactly what another chosen one needs to trust what they're feeling. We recognize each other. We find each other, and together we remember. The portal has already begun to open. Can you feel it?